Here too, no end in sight. Streaming now.
Hello and a very warm welcome. Thanks for tuning into News 9 Live. I'm Kabir Naqvi and we continue with our coverage from the 8th day of the Israel-Gaza war. It's not a conflict anymore, ladies and gentlemen, as Israel continues to pound the Gaza Strip via air raids as Palestinians in thousands, tens of thousands, move towards southern part of the Strip only to seek safety. In the latest developments, tens of thousands of people in Gaza, they've all moved towards the southern part of the Gaza Strip. All of this to seek refuge following Israel's evacuation warning. Many people out there are saying that what the Hamas did was actually terrorism, but what the Israeli forces are now doing is actually a war crime. Meanwhile, the Israeli Defense Forces conducted localized raids in the Gaza Strip. Take a look at some of these visuals as overnight bombardment of the Gaza Strip continued. Both sides at this point in time, ladies and gentlemen, have suffered heavy casualties, with over 1,300 Israelis and over 1,900 Palestinians losing their life, ladies and gentlemen. It is the 8th day. The death toll has risen to 3,200. At the same time, the Israel Defense Forces have conducted localized raids in Gaza, attacking the northern part of the Strip. Hamas has told everybody to ignore these evacuation orders, even as tens of thousands, and we'll show you those visuals of how people have begun moving towards the southern part of the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, India's very own Operation Ajay has brought back the second batch of Indians, another set of 235 Indians that are back home in India. Meanwhile, ladies and gentlemen, the Israeli Defense Forces have confirmed that they did in fact carry out these localized raids. Visuals of the IDF on your screens, latest visuals. Over the past 24 hours, these raids, the localized ones, have been carried out across the Gaza Strip, more specifically focused in the northern part. Now, this particular raid has come ahead of an anticipated ground offensive in the war-hit region of Gaza. A ground invasion is looming, certainly, as tanks and as the 3 lakh reservists that we've been seeing over the days, they're moving and inching closer to the Gaza-Israel border. Now, a statement from the IDF stated that over the past 24 hours, the Israeli military and its IDF forces have carried out localized raids inside the territory of the Gaza Strip. All of this to complete the effort to cleanse the area of terrorists and weaponry. On normal streets, on roads where normal traffic would ply, today we're looking at tanks and various machinery of the Israeli Defense Forces that are now moving towards and inching towards the Gaza Strip. Now, during these operations, and even as you're looking at all of these visuals, from choppers in the air to buildings completely being crumbled down to the ground, take a look at that. During these operations, there was also an effort to locate the missing persons. So the hostage situation is something that Israel is not, losing its focus on. It is going to continue to maintain its keen efforts to repatriate all those that have been taken hostage by the Hamas back into the Gaza Strip. So locating hostages was another reason why these localized raids were carried out. Now, it's important to note here that Hamas has taken several Israeli forces as hostage and is using them to deter Israeli attacks on Gaza. We earlier also got visuals that were put out by the Hamas. Of course, for concerned reasons, we can't show you those visuals, but the Hamas holding up Israeli infants as quote-unquote human shields, that is something that people are appalled at with the visuals that one can now see over social media. Now, despite this, Israeli forces have continued their operations to respond to the Palestinian terrorist organization, the Hamas. This was another attempt made by the Israeli forces to rescue the hostages, and this war has been initiated by the Hamas, and this is specifically what Israel has been saying, also quoting several Western news mouthpieces as well. And today marks a week since an unprecedented assault was launched on the people of southern Israel after the Hamas fired thousands of rockets early in the day, and then they barged into the Israeli territory, sparking an unprovoked conflict. We all know what happened at the Supernova Music Festival, ladies and gentlemen. 260 odd Israelis, all those that were dancing, making merry, were shot in the back, chased down and then shot. And since then, Israel has launched numerous counteroffensives. Gaza and the entire Gaza Strip, from Ramallah, from Khan Yunis, you name it. The humanitarian situation is harrowing it at this moment, and the buildings and the entire Gaza Strip, well, most of it seems like an apocalyptic ruin. Now, the Hamas terrorists have carried out brutal attacks against the people of Israel, sparing not even the youngest children. But on the other hand, the Palestinians are alleging that even hospitals are not being spared by the Israeli Defense Forces. In these attacks, there are several UN locations, a UN school, a UN hospital, a UN corridor, where people are at this point in time taking shelter. But it seems like those places are also being attacked. Not even journalists are being spared, ladies and gentlemen. And we'll talk about that in just a bit. Because at least one journalist has been killed and 6 other journalists have been wounded, including 2 Al Jazeera reporters. And all of this in a shelling by Israeli forces in southern Lebanon, according to the witnesses that were reporting from the scene. What you're looking at, the man that you're looking at on your screens, Reuters news agency has confirmed that on Friday, Issam Abdullah, a videographer, on your screens, ladies and gentlemen, was killed in the attack. Another reminder to everybody that's watching this of the major sacrifices that journalists have to give up in situations like embedded journalism or in war crime journalism. The group of journalists, including Al Jazeera, AFP, were all near Alma al-Shab, which is close to the Israel border, where the Israeli military and the Lebanese militia, Hezbollah, have been trading fire in border clashes. Meanwhile, amid the escalating war between the Israeli army and the Hamas terrorists, a Reuters video journalist was killed. 6 other journalists were injured. Now, these journalists lost their lives when a missile, apparently fired from the direction of Israel, struck them. Let's listen into some global reactions and the furor that this death has now created.
I want to say how much this demonstrates the enormous risk of spillover of this conflict, namely in relation to Lebanon. And I want to pay tribute to the journalists that so many, unfortunately, the largest number ever last year, so many journalists are paying with their lives the work they do to bring truth to everybody in the world. That I present to their families my deepest condolences.
I mean, it's been that way forever, hasn't it? I mean, journalists are always kind of the front line. They don't really have a great defense. And, I'm also married to my wife is Lebanese, so Lebanon is it's another of these great sort of sad stories. Look, it's obviously, it's not just journalism. It's the whole. The whole area is just on fire, and it just is heartbreaking all the way around. And all you can do is pray that there's some version of this that comes to some peaceful end soon. And I don't see it happening in the near future. I don't think anybody does.
Extend all our deepest condolences to you and all of your colleagues at Reuters and all of and all your family. And of course, wish a speedy recovery to all the other journalists that were injured. We understand one was severely injured. This is yet another example of the daily dangers journalists face in covering conflict throughout the world, and we do hope that there is an investigation as to exactly what happened.
The internet, I don't know the details. Usually we investigate every civilian casualties that occur, and we regret it. It is never deliberately. You know, we always try to mitigate and avoid civilian casualties. Obviously, we would never want to hit or kill or shoot any journalist that is doing his job. But you know, we're in a state of war. Things might happen. We regret them. We feel sorry, and we will investigate it. Right now, it's too early to call what happened there.
Well, thoughts and prayers to the family of the slain journalist. Meanwhile, Israeli infantry made their first raids into the Gaza Strip yesterday since Hamas fighters rampaged through southern Israel last Saturday. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said a campaign of retaliation has only just begun.
אנחנו הולמים באויבינו בעוצמה חסרת תקדים.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel was, quote, striking at our enemies with unprecedented might on Friday, and emphasized that, quote, this is just the beginning. Israeli infantry made their first raids into the Gaza Strip Friday and vowed to annihilate Hamas after its fighters stormed through towns and villages in southern Israel last week, killing 1,300 Israelis, mainly civilians, and making off with scores of hostages. Netanyahu added, our enemies have only begun paying the price, and I won't detail what is yet to come. So far, troops backed by tanks have mounted raids to attack Palestinian rocket crews and sought information about the location of hostages, according to an Israeli military spokesperson. This follows airstrikes that Gaza authorities say killed nearly 2,000 people. On Friday, Israel gave more than 1 million residents of the northern half of Gaza 24 hours to flee to the south to avoid an onslaught. Hamas vowed to fight to the last drop of blood and told residents to stay.
The situation in Gaza has reached a dangerous new low.
Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned of a disaster if so many people were forced to flee, and said the siege of the enclave should be lifted to let in aid.
We need immediate humanitarian access throughout Gaza so that we can get fuel, food and water to everyone in need. Even wars have rules.
Earlier, a UN spokesperson said it would be impossible for Gazans to obey Israel's relocation order without devastating humanitarian consequences. Israel responded that the UN should condemn Hamas and support Israel's right to self-defense. Tens of thousands are estimated to have fled south in Gaza after the notice to evacuate, the UN said Friday. Gaza authorities said 70 people were killed and 200 were wounded when Israel struck cars and trucks carrying people fleeing. Reuters could not independently verify the reported incident.
Well, now, amid the war between Israel and Palestinian terrorist group Hamas, another batch of stranded Indians were brought back to India as part of the country's ongoing repatriation mission, Operation Ajay. What you're looking at on your screens is Union Minister Dr. Rajkumar Ranjan, who's welcoming all the repatriated Indians back home. Now, the leader also took to the microblogging website, X, formerly known as Twitter, and spoke about it. Meanwhile, all those smiling faces were happy to come back home, of course. A week-long gruesome conflict, tensions were certainly escalated. They're always happy to be back home. Meanwhile, the special flight with the second batch of 235 Indian nationals chanted Vande Mataram whilst on the flight. Now, this was the second batch of 235 Indian nationals, including 2 infants, that took off from Ben Gurion Airport yesterday at about 11:02 p.m. in the night, local time.
relieved because all the flights were cancelled. Like we booked one Air India flight and then another Emirates, both were cancelled. So we are basically trapped, and definitely only this evacuation process was the only option, and we are relieved from that situation, because we at least I never seen this type of situation in my life. So Israeli people are very familiar. It is nothing for them, but for us, we were afraid. And I am pregnant, so I cannot run to the shelter. We know that if we go to the shelter, nothing will happen. But if I can't go to the shelter, then there is a risk. So particularly in my case, definitely it is a big relief. And the way they handled, the way they give priority to all of us, they communicated very well, and really it's a very good initiative. And thank to we really, from the bottom of our heart, we really thank the government of India.
It was very helpful. We were in a very critical situation. We were helpless at the time, so it is helping a lot for the people who struggled in the war.
Namaste. Thank you so much, Government of India, Operation Ajay, the whole team, and the team IGCI for helping us taking our homeland safely. Thank you so much.
पिछले 2 साल से इजराइल में रह रहा हूँ और सब कुछ वहाँ अच्छा ही था. लास्ट 2 वीक्स बहुत ही बेकार गया हमारा, बट अभी सब कुछ अच्छा है. हम यहाँ अपने देश में आ गए वापस. अब हमें अच्छा लग रहा है.
ये तो बहुत अच्छा मुहिम है. मैं इसके लिए धन्यवाद भी मैं करता हूँ गवर्नमेंट को भी, और जो भी हमारे प्राइम मिनिस्टर नरेंद्र मोदी जी हैं उनको भी, और विदेश मंत्री और इजराइल एम्बेसी को मैं सबको धन्यवाद देता हूँ. इट्स वंडरफुल and we are very happy for the initiative, and many thanks to Minister of External Affairs, Dr. Jai Shankar, Government of India. So Jai Hind.
And I'll tell you why all these repatriated Indians, many of them were working there, many of them trying to live their livelihood, why they're thanking the government and why they're so happy that they're back. Because take a look at this. The streets of Gaza City looked completely desolated yesterday, with abandoned cars, scattered debris, and destroyed building facades as Israel's military called for civilians to relocate the south within 24 hours ahead of an expected ground invasion. This is Gaza right now, ladies and gentlemen. An apocalyptic ruins. And I'm going to reiterate what many people are saying. This essentially sums up the geopolitical, diplomatic divide across the globe right now. Many are saying what the Hamas did was evil and was actually war terror. But now what the Israeli Defense Forces are doing to the people of Palestine can be accounted as war crimes. This is essentially the debate. Meanwhile, tens of thousands of people from this apocalyptic ruin that you can see from Ramallah, Khan Yunis, several other places across the Gaza Strip, moving towards the south. Why does south of Gaza have significance? Well, because you have the Rafah border with Egypt, which right now is shut. But authorities are saying even if the border was open, Palestinians would not have been allowed to go outside, leave the border. The World Health Organization has said that this evacuation process must stop. Are we looking at potentially another millions of people to now be rendered homeless, to now be displaced in refugee shelters? Blasts from the airstrikes continue to ring out over the city of more than 1 million people. Of smoke, as you can hear and see yourself, rose across the skyline. And the smoke has been billowing over the Gaza Strip for the past 1 week. Israeli warplanes have continued pounding Gaza, this all in retaliation for the weekend attacks by Hamas terrorists that has killed more than 1,300 Israelis. Now the bombardment of the Gaza Strip, which is home to 2.3 million people, many say it's an open-air prison, has left more than 1,500 Palestinians dead. The Israeli military said it would operate significantly in Gaza City in the coming days, even as a ground invasion looms, and civilians would only be able to return when another announcement was made. Israel has vowed to annihilate the Hamas terrorist group which led the attacks on the 7th of October, just a week from now. Meanwhile, last Saturday's attack by the Hamas caught Israel completely off guard. The attack was unprecedented in scale and its intensity. But how was the attack planned? And who was the mastermind behind it? My colleague Karthikeya Sharma tells you all about it, the mastermind of the attack. Take a look.
Let me take you through the details of this elusive man. And in the course of it, I will tell you the latest revelations which have come from Israel as to how they were able to circumvent the intelligence. First, we'll stay on this. Mohammed Daif is the military commander of Hamas, and Hamas is inspired from Muslim Brotherhood, the original and the oldest and longest running Islamic insurgency. He heads the military wing of Hamas. Hamas has multiple wings. So he's heading the military wing. Mohammed Daif. Daif heads the Hamas Al-Qassam Brigade. That is the name of it. He has been pictured only thrice. There are only 3 pictures available of him, once in his 20s. But his real name is Muhammad Masri. And Muhammad Masri, whose Daif lost his family. His whereabouts today are unknown. His only family died in Gaza bombing. He was arrested in 1989. He spent 16 months behind bars. He planned the attack with Yahya Sinwar. So this Hamas operation with Yahya Sinwar, who is the leader of Hamas in Gaza. So there are 2 people. That's where Israeli intelligence is pointed at. Now, how Hamas broke into the Israeli infrastructure. Israel's security system made big mistakes. These are the revelations which have been reported from Reuters to New York Times to multiple newspapers in the West. Intelligence did detect surge in activity on Gaza network. This is a fact. The warning was not acted upon. Drones destroyed remote controlled guns and surveillance cameras. Drones disabled cell network on border. Israeli soldiers were shot dead on beds. They couldn't just get up because they were not aware of the action which was happening. Clustering of commanders in a single border base. Another tactical mistake. This is something very important. I'll tell you about it later. How 2 brigade commanders met, could not get in touch with Tel Aviv. And they said, okay, you take care of this hamlet and I will go and take care of the another hamlet. Very important. This has been reported by Reuters also. Israel focus remained on Lebanese border. There was a meeting which took place a couple of days back. So when the biggest threats were discussed, the Gaza was not discussed. The issues of Lebanese border was discussed. Number of troops on border were reduced. Some of them went to West Bank, but the fact of the matter is there was over-reliance on the surveillance instrument. Because they felt automated systems would work, subterranean wall would work because that will take care of the tunnels. So automatic systems failed, control rooms remain clueless. Let me tell you what, we'll stay on this. These control rooms were behind the barbed wire. But when the intervention happened on the side of the Hamas, the control room was not aware that they were being overrun. 1,500 terrorists surged through 30 points. Aditya, 30 points on border. 1,500 terrorists from 30 points, and the security was taken unaware. Hamas broke the barriers. It was noticed very late. Tel Aviv was not in control in the initial hours, and let me explain this. Wires have reported that when the brigade, the commanders were speaking to each other, there was no direction coming in from the control room, which means that the local commanders for example, the colonel in Indian Army, the decision making was localized. So there was not a joint command control room which was directing them. And this has been confirmed. The 2 brigade commanders met on the way which a complex army operation wouldn't have allowed. So it tells us how Hamas carried out the attack, where the state failed, and who Mohammed Daif is.
Meanwhile, in a bid to quell the ongoing hostilities, the Israeli Defense Forces have intensified their strikes on the Hamas terror targets within the Gaza Strip. Now, notably, Nukba terrorist operatives identified as key players in the recent infiltration into Israel were among those targeted in a staging ground. Now, the IDF also conducted wide-scale strikes. You're looking at an aerial view of where all the strikes actually took place across the Gaza Strip. Thermal vision cams to help assist your vision so that you can understand exactly where all the attacks and the bombardment is taking place. The IDF also conducted wide-scale strikes on operational headquarters that are used by the Hamas operatives, where aerial activities were coordinated from. Meanwhile, in a major development, Mirad Abu Mirad, who headed the Hamas's aerial system, was killed during these particular strikes. So this is the latest. Key Hamas leader Murad Abu Murad was killed in these strikes. The IDF strikes Hamas's aerial chief, somebody who coordinated Hamas's aerial attacks, the aerial offensive. Let's not forget, 7th October, Saturday, early in the morning, more than 5,000 rockets that were launched from the Gaza Strip towards Israel. All of that aerial offense, the chief of Hamas's aerial offense, key Hamas leader Murad Abu Murad, was killed in these particular attacks. Let's not forget, localized raids have been ongoing at the hands of the Israeli Defense Forces. As the situation unfolds, the IDF maintains its commitment to defending Israel against the Hamas terrorist organization. This being read in a statement that has come out of the IDF. The IDF letting everybody know that during the attack, Murad Abu Murad, who's the head of the air formation in Gaza, we all know the rocket warfare that's happening on both sides of the divide. Now, in the air formation in Gaza City, Murad Abu Murad is somebody who took a large part and directed terrorists in the murderous attack that took place on Saturday. He has been killed by the Israeli Defense Forces and in the latest strikes. Bombardment, smoke billowing across the Gaza skyline. These are visuals that have now become staple to this particular conflict. IDF has killed the Hamas's aerial chief, ladies and gentlemen. Key Hamas leader Murad Abu Murad has been killed by Israel, even as a ground invasion looms large. We're already getting visuals of some 3 lakh reservists and tanks and choppers that have been placed in position on the Gaza Strip near the border. Take a look at that. Tanks being mobilized, pushed further, inching closer towards that smart fence which the Hamas operatives broke down on the 7th of October. A smart fence which took $1.1 billion to make, was completed only in 2021. That smart fence was broken apart. Explosives, small vehicles like motorbikes and two-wheelers were used. And then the earth movers were used to completely break away the fence. And then the onslaught began on the 7th of October. Meanwhile, after that, Israeli forces have taken control over the southern territories and are inching closer because the ground invasion certainly looms large. We don't know if it's going to be the next couple of hours or the next couple of days, but it is going to happen, at least if the words of Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, are to be believed. Well, so all of this is essentially taking place across the Gaza Strip. But that's a very small portion in the entirety of the land. What's happening in Israel? Incoming rocket sirens have been sounded in Tel Aviv, ladies and gentlemen, and the surrounding suburbs as well.
I also want to say a word about the situation
This also includes
in Israel.
the southern coastal city of Ashdod. Now, there are no immediate reports of injuries or damage in the latest rocket barrage from the Gaza Strip. But as these sirens wailed, and take a look at that, sheer panic, everybody running for cover. Meanwhile, ladies and gentlemen, there has been no immediate report per se of injuries or damage resulting from this particular rocket assault. However, the repeated incidents of rocket fire have instilled fear, like you can see, and uncertainty and anxiety, where everybody starts panicking and starts running for cover. This amongst the residents of Tel Aviv and Ashdod. Well, now diplomacy around it and international key players, how are they reacting? In a statement regarding the escalating situation in Israel, President Joe Biden expressed deep concern and sorrow over the horrifying attack that has resulted in the loss of so many innocent lives, including at least 27 Americans. He also condemned the perpetrators, stating that they make even extremist groups and terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda appear relatively restrained, characterizing them as pure evil. Let's listen into what the US President had to say.
I also want to say a word about the situation in Israel. The more we learn about the attack, the more horrifying it becomes. More than 1,000 innocent lives lost, including at least 27 Americans. These guys make Al-Qaeda look pure. They're pure evil. As I said from the beginning, the United States, make no mistake about it, stands with Israel. The United States stands with Israel. Secretary of State Blinken was in Israel yesterday, and Secretary of Defense Austin is there today. We're making sure Israel has what it needs to defend itself and respond to these attacks. It's also a priority for me to urgently address the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. At my direction, our teams are working in the region, including communicating directly with the governments of Israel, Egypt, Jordan, and other Arab nations, and the United Nations to surge support and humanitarian consequences for Hamas attack to help Israel. You know, we can't lose sight of the fact that the overwhelming majority of Palestinians had nothing to do with Hamas and Hamas's appalling attacks, and they're suffering as a result as well. This morning, I spoke with the family members of all those Americans who are still unaccounted for on a Zoom call for about an hour and 10, 15 minutes. They're going through agony, not knowing what the status of their sons, daughters, husbands, wives, children are. You know, it's gut-wrenching. I assured them my personal commitment to do everything possible to return every missing American to their families. We're working round the clock to secure the release of Americans held by Hamas in close cooperation with Israel and our partners around the region. We're not going to stop till we bring them home.
Well, so clearly the president has underlined the unwavering support of the United States for Israel. He's emphasized that both Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin have been actively engaging with Israel, and they've all said that they're going to continue to back Israel. Furthermore, President Biden has also recognized the urgent need to address the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Even as we're looking at all those visuals of apocalyptic buildings, blown apart structures, people pretty much running for their lives, he disclosed that his administration's team are actively working in the region and are in direct communication with various governments, including Israel, Egypt, Jordan, and other Arab nations, as well as the United Nations. Their collective goal is to provide support and address humanitarian consequences of Hamas's attacks while assisting Israel in these challenges. Meanwhile, dozens of cars were seen leaving Khan Yunis as Israel instructed residents to flee to the south of Gaza. Israel's military called for all civilians of the Gaza city, which is actually more than 1 million people, to relocate towards the south of the Strip within the next 24 hours. That deadline, ladies and gentlemen, is almost up, as the Israeli forces have amassed tanks for an expected ground invasion, which is going to be in response to the devastating attack by the terrorist group Hamas that was carried out on the 7th of October. Now, the United Nations has intervened. The United Nations has said that evacuating everyone was impossible. How are you going to evacuate 1 million people within 24 hours? With power supplies cut, food and water supply short in the Palestinian enclave, all these supplies running short after a week of retaliatory airstrikes and a full Israeli blockade. How is it possible to relocate millions towards the south of the Gaza Strip? Already a small place, already 2.3 million people inside the Gaza Strip. People call it an open-air prison. There's nowhere else to go. Water on the other side, borders on the other. Palestinians in southern and central areas of the enclave, where people were expected to flee to, said that airstrikes had hit there overnight as well, with central parts also hit yesterday morning. Now, there was no immediate comment on the same from Israel. Gaza hospital have also been attacked. Several doctors were on record speaking to various media agencies, talking about how these areas that have been told to the Israeli Defense Forces are safe havens for people that are trying to seek refuge, for people that are trying to seek shelter, were still attacked. Meanwhile, thousands of cars that you can see leaving from Khan Yunis. Now, the UN Humanitarian Office, the OCHA, has said that more than 4 lakh people had fled their homes in Gaza, and 23 aid workers had been killed, even as mass displacement continues. And take a look at this. We have an important update on the ongoing conflict in the region by the IDF spokesperson themselves, Jonathan Kondrakis, who's going to provide us with a situational update on the war against the Hamas. What's really happening? What's going to happen next? Well, let's hear what he has to say.
And its surroundings to move north, to move south, and evacuate themselves to this place here, the Gaza River, in order to be safer and in order to not be in an area where we are going to enhance our military operations. We use the words significant military operations. We do this, we advertised our intentions in advance, not because it has any military logic, it doesn't, because we want civilians not to be affected by the war. We didn't put those civilians there. They are not our enemy. We are not trying to kill or injure any civilians. We are fighting against Hamas. That needs to be abundantly clear. We are fighting and targeting Hamas and its military infrastructure. Wherever it is, that's where we targeted, and we have targeted around the Gaza Strip and in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. We have seen a significant movement of Palestinian civilians towards the south, and that's all over the news. We have seen people listening to our warning, understanding that they are doing the clever thing, moving out of a dangerous area, and that they are doing the right thing for their family and their own safety. Extremely sad and worrying to see is the fact that Hamas actively undermines and has tried to stop Palestinian civilians from evacuating that area, both via messages and also checkpoints and stops on the ground, according to reports made by international media. That, I think, is the peak of cynicism, the fact that Hamas not only holds civilians as their human shields, not only does Hamas embed itself within the civilian population and tries to use them as a disguise, not only do they hide their infrastructure underneath the civilian infrastructure, not all of those things combined, and also when we ask the civilians to evacuate, Hamas tries to stop it. Hopefully Palestinians will do that as fast as possible, vacate the area for their own security, and return only when we tell them that it is safe to do so. Around the Gaza Strip, as have been for many days, are Israeli reserve soldiers in formation that are getting ready for the next stage of operations. They are all around the Gaza Strip, in the south, in the center, and in the north, and they are preparing themselves for whatever target they will get, whatever task. As I've said before, our aim is very clear. The end state of this war is that we will dismantle Hamas and its military capabilities and fundamentally change the situation so that Hamas never again has the ability to inflict any damage on Israeli civilians or soldiers. Moving on to the northern front, after a few days that were a little bit quieter, I'd like to focus on an event that happened in the western sector of the border, in this area here. Hezbollah fighters fired an anti-tank missile towards Israeli troops. There was a short battle, and the situation eventually calmed down. Afterwards, Hezbollah sent drones into Israel and also fired surface-to-air missiles against an Israeli aircraft.
We're just also learning at this point in time that there's a lot of debris and destruction in Ashkelon due to the Gaza rockets. But meanwhile, that's all the time we have for you in this edition as we cover the Israel raiding the Gaza Strip. We are going to bring you the latest developments and ground reports. Our exclusive reporters are going to be there with the right kind of reportage for you. But that's all the time we have for you. This is Kabir Naqvi signing off. Lots more coming right on the other side. Keep watching News 9 Live.
They picked my husband. He was tortured there for 2 years. He was enforced disappeared. We had no idea where he is. Within 15 minutes, we got the information that the whole area is surrounded by Pakistan Army. I came out from that in disguise, and after 5 to 6 hours, I was in Kandahar. I don't have any message for Pakistan. There is no politician in Pakistan. They are puppets of Pakistan Army.
Streaming now